Okay, here's another lesson on autumn leaves, and this time I wanted to cover something called guide tones. And I've talked about autumn leaves before in the previous lesson and how you can use chord tones. And so this is an even more basic way of using chord tones. So I'm going to look at 5 different ways that you can use guide tones to improve your playing. And first of all, let's look at what are the guide tones. So what is that? And so the guide tones are just, well, it could be different things, but the most common way to look at it is it's the 3rd and the 7th of a chord, or of a chord. And the kind of notes that define the chords. So if we take autumn leaves, which is a very common chord progression. There's actually a word for this chord progression in Swedish that I couldn't find a translation for it. I guess it would be like falling fifths or something that we're very common, right? Very tonal kind of chord progression. So if we play those bass notes and add the 3rd and the 7th to each chord, okay, so if I remove the bass and just play the chords, or sorry, the guide tones, sounds like this. I think you can totally hear the chord progression going by, even though I'm not even playing the bass notes. The bass notes, we don't have to, we can just play. Right? That's why those are kind of the notes that guide us through this chord progression. And again, I want to stress that it works for these kind of tunes. It doesn't work for non-functional harmony, like way shorter tunes, or more complex tunes, which has a non-functional harmony, which is a topic that I might cover in another lesson. But it works for like the American Songbook standards, right? So where we have these types of 2-5-1 based chord progressions. So let me just play these guide tones over the backing track. So then, of course, I can use this for comping, which would be the first step. So just add rhythm. Right? So in this example, let the F fall to an E natural there. Because it's kind of a G6 sound because of the minor chord being a tonic there. So we shouldn't overanalyze that, why that works. Sometimes it just sounds good, and that's not for me. I noticed that on this backing track they are playing a G7 there sometimes when it goes back to the C minor. So then I would have to adjust accordingly. So yeah, comping. Then you could, for as guitar players, we can play the guide tones and maybe add something on top, like an extension, the 9th. Alterations. There's lots of different ways you can approach this. Let me just tune this. Then another thing I've talked about in a previous lesson is something called I call it poor man's chord melody. We can use these guide tones to play a simple chord melody arrangement. Guide tones. I actually prefer to play them on these two strings, the 5th and the 4th string. Very Lenny Bro thing to do, right? So if you checked out the Canadian guitar legend Lenny Bro, he's a master at this stuff. So you could actually come up with a simple chord melody arrangement. Sometimes maybe you're on a gig and there's no piano players, nobody's comping. You have to play in this kind of style. When this is a very good technique that you can use. Problem though is that in this case, it's not very sophisticated because the melody already has those guide tones in the melody. So it's kind of redundant. There are more sophisticated ways you can do this. I'm not going to get into it now, but I could actually kind of use that to, because the guide tone is already in the melody, I can come up with kind of like a quasi-classical sounding etc. Alright, so improvising, playing kind of very simple chord melody, using just the guide tones. And I mean, you could use other notes as well, but based it on the guide tones, right? So that would be the second step. Then third step is to using guide tones as a way of soloing. So I'll try to demonstrate that. So just maybe playing the guide tones rhythmically. Here's the G7. Then maybe adding some chromaticism, like from below. Or surrounding them. I'll do some of those. So for what do you call it? Leading note from below. Or surrounding. You could use the guiding notes to kind of as a jumping off point to larger intervals with other notes, like but I'm still kind of targeting the guide tones, and then I'm playing in larger interval after the guide tone. I'll show you what that sounds like. So I'm surrounding the E flat, the D, so I'm not playing only guide tones, obviously, but as I think you can see that I'm using the guide tones as my main focus when I'm playing. Then I'm adding other stuff to that. Moving on here. Yeah, so one thing that I think is good is imitating the left hand of a piano player. When the piano player is soloing, they kind of solo with this hand and then they just throw in short little chords. And so a guitar player, we're kind of envious of that. Like we can't do that, or it's a lot harder for us to do that. But we can kind of imitate that with the guide tones. And you hear a lot of players do that these days, like Kurt Rosenwinkel's and those guys. They kind of throw in little hits in their soloing, almost like they're comping for themselves, right? So the guide tones could be a very good way to get started doing that. So I'm just gonna solo, and every now and then I'm gonna throw in a little guide tone hit as if it's my piano hand doing that, right? So just soloing randomly. Right, so you can just try to experiment with that, doing it even without a backing track. Okay, so it's almost like you're comping for yourself there, right? So it's a very modern way of playing, but also kind of not modern. I guess because a lot of players in the 80s, they used distortion, right? Like when the fusion scene was going on, and had players like Mike Stern and Schofield, they used a lot of distortion. Then this kind of thing doesn't work that well if you're using distortion, right? Before we move on to the just some housekeeping, I now have some Patreons. I'm not sure how you say that. Patreons. And so thank you so much for that. And Brian, you were first. So a CD is in the mail, as it were. And yeah, Skype lessons are happening. And I was also featured on another YouTube channel with Coffee with Dan. So I'll put a link to that episode below, so you can check that out if you want. So thanks to Dan for having me on your YouTube channel. Okay, so last step is using guide tones as for ear training, which is very, very good. We did that in jazz college. I remember having to identify guide tones, sing the guide tones, hear the guide tones. And I already had pretty good ears before I went to college, but doing a lot of this, I noticed, really helped me. It's kind of like you're defining the chord motion. You can really, really hear, if you can zoom in on those guide tones when you're listening, you can really hear the 2 5s go by in a more clear way. So practicing that is really helpful and important. So what you could do, for example, is you can play one guide tone and try to sing that one. So then you might want to do it so make sure that you are correct. So play both at the same time. Find that note a little bit difficult to be. Something is a little bit difficult to find the pitch on that note. I don't know why. So that I locate a problem area for me that I need to work on. Why am I having trouble hearing that F there, right? So you can play the bass notes and sing guide tones. So or sing the bass notes and play the guide tones, sing the other guide tones. So yeah, practicing like that is very, very helpful, especially if you're new to this and you haven't really thought about the guide tones. So any kind of older jazz standards, American songbook, like tunes that have that are based on 2-5-1s. So All the Things You Are would be a great example of a tune that this kind of practicing really, really helps. I mean, the melody are the guide tone. Right? So you can hear the chords go by there, I think. So yeah, that was it for this lesson. I shall see you next time.